Alright, Algebra 1, Section 1, Chapter 1, Section 1, Variables and Expressions. We are looking at these terms today: algebraic expression, variable term, factor, product, power, exponent, base. An algebraic expression is one that, like this, 2x plus 5, must include a variable and at least one operation. So here we have our variable. And we actually have two operations here because that says 2 times x plus 5. Each of these parts of the algebraic expression are called terms. So each of these are called terms. They're usually separated by an addition or subtraction sign. And this you might refer to as a variable term, whereas the 5 would be called a constant term, because this doesn't change. This changes depending on what x is, so 2x is the variable term. Next, we're looking at factors. So a factor is a part of a multiplication. Here we have two factors, 2 and x. Technically this says 2 times x. Each of these are a factor. Or x times x times x. Each of these are considered a factor. The result of a multiplication is called a product. Down here we have repeated multiplication, and this can also be written as x to the third power. That is called, as I just mentioned, a power. So that is a power. So here we have an example of a power. The entire expression is considered the power. The small number is the exponent, and the large part is called the base. Alright, now that we've looked at some of the terms we'll be using, let's look at translating algebraic expressions into English, into a verbal expression. So here we have x plus 5. When we have a variable, we'll call that a number, and there are multiple ways that we could name this. We could say a number increased by 5 or a number plus 5. So I'll just write increased by 5 now, and I'll have a list of different terms that we can use later on. This next one, x minus 4, we could say a number minus 4, but there's a term that I want you to be familiar with, and that is less than. Anytime you see less than, this expression goes at the end. So 4 less than a number. Notice that minus 4 is after the x. And that is important because the commutative property does not apply to subtraction. So make a note of that. Less than always goes at the end. There are other ways that we could write this, the difference of x and 4, x minus 4. But this one you have to pay attention to whenever you see less than. Then 2x means 2 times x, which could also be written as the product of 2 and a number. And then here we have x divided by 3, or the quotient of a number and 3. There's a nifty little list of terms that you can use for this. This is taken from the book. Learn to recognize these. As I said, less than. This is the important one to remember. That goes at the end. Of is a small word that appears quite a few times. When you see of, that implies a multiplication. So we can go the other way too and write an algebraic expression for each verbal expression. So here we have a number t, so they've defined a variable for us, and more than 6. So we can either write 6 plus t, or knowing the commutative property, this could also be written as t plus 6. 10 less than the product of 7 and f. Okay, here's our variable, 7 and f. Here's what we need to be paying attention to, less than, remember that always goes at the end. So I'm going to put that at the end. Something, something, minus 10. 10 less than. Don't start with this. Don't write 10 minus the product of 7 and f. Product means multiplication. So I have 7f minus 10. 2/3 of the volume V. Here we have of. Remember that meant multiplication. So we have 2/3, and then of times V. I could write a multiplication symbol, but if there's no symbol that implies multiplication. And lastly, here's a word problem. When you're reading a word problem, you're going to have to define a variable. You read through and see, what are we looking for? Mr. Martinez orders 250 keychains printed with his athletic team's logo and 500 pencils printed with their web address. Write an algebraic expression that represents the cost of the order. Okay, we have 250 keychains. That's what he's going to have to pay for. And 500 pencils. When defining a variable, I usually just pick the letter that goes with what the term is. So keychains, we can just do it K, 250 K keychains, and would imply adding 500. Now define a variable, P, for pencils. And that's all, folks. See you tomorrow.